Hey, it's Dr. Darin Schmidt at the Nutritional Healing Center of Ann Arbor. My tagline, which I've never said before in a video, but I'm going to say it now, it's healthcare the way Mother Nature intended. So last week, on July 10th and 11th, I was in Washington, D.C. to attend 2 days worth of USDA 2020 Food Guidelines Committee discussion. And then they had an open mic day for the public to speak for 3 minutes. So Wednesday, all day, I sat in the audience and I was listening to the committee members. There's 20 of them. And here's a picture of them. And you go on their website to find out who they are, a little bit about their background and what they have to tackle. And it's a big deal. Now this law, this food guidelines, should have never been passed as a law. And in the guidelines, it says that they have to look at the preponderance of science to make their recommendations on food. Now, I'm going to dissect this out. Okay, so what does that mean, preponderance of science? It means that you look at the totality of it. That's something that there's a vegan, Dr. Joel Kahn, he says, look at the totality of science. Dr. David Katz, another vegan medical doctor, he says, look at preponderance of science. But we have to define what is science. And science it's a method. It's a step-by-step series of actions that you take in order to come to a fact. And there are two major types of science in standard universities. And the first one is an observational study. The second one is a trial. If you've seen my videos before, I've talked about these two. An observation is not a science. You have to do an experiment where you do something to a group of people and you measure the outcome compared to a control group. Science includes an experiment. Without an experiment, then it's not science. So here's a bunch of graphics I want to show you that I just pulled up, and we'll get through this quickly and then we'll get back on task regarding the USDA meetings. So I went online and I searched the scientific method, and I clicked on images, and this is what came up. Several graphics that show what the scientific method is, and it's basically make an observation, ask a question, and make a hypothesis. And then the fourth step in this graphic is conduct your experiment. We're actually doing something to a group of people, and you compare that with a control trial, for example, a control group. Then lastly, draw conclusions and report your results. So when you look at epidemiology or observational studies, they make an observation, that's step one, and then they make a hypothesis, and here it's step three. And that's where they stop. So the hypothesis might be meat is bad, meat causes cancer. So then you have more and more people thinking that meat causes cancer, but they never finished the scientific method. So you have all these schools of public health, like Harvard School of Public Health. And they say that meat is bad, but they have not tested it. When you do test it, it has been done, it shows that meat does not cause cancer. And one experiment can negate all of the observational studies conducted in the last 110 years. So an observational study does not give you cause, but an experiment does. So let's look at the next graphic. Here it's 7 steps, and the experimentation step is number 4. And with this graphic, there's only 5 steps in the scientific method, and experimentation is number 3. It's hard to see because it's yellow, but there's experimentation. And here's 8 steps, but experiment right here is number 4. You can't have science unless you do the experiment. Here's one with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 with various other steps in the middle. If it's a yes or no, the green part is test with an experiment. No matter who you're talking to, when they talk about the scientific method, they always have the experiment in here. With this graphic, it's the green box in the middle. Test your hypothesis by doing an experiment. So in these universities, you get so many people believing the conclusion of a hypothesis, and when we talk to them about the truth, like this experiment shows the opposite, now they set you aside. Now you're a martyr. They destroy your career. They talk bad about you on social media. And here's another one for design and carry out an experiment right there. And the last one I'm going to show you is number 3. We have the experiment here. So the point is, if you don't conduct the experiment, it's not science. So the people that showed up to speak in front of the USDA were kind of broken down into a few groups. And one of those groups is industry. There's also the keto low-carb people and the vegan people. And so those are the 3 major groups. But I just want to list off some of the industry people that showed up, and basically what their message was is that we exist and we are important. So that includes the Snack International group. So these are people that are promoting for you to eat more snacks, and they want the USDA to make sure there's snacks in the next food pyramid. Unilever, which is a food producer, and the American Pulse Association. When they first came up, I thought it was something to do with checking the pulse of your heart. And cardiovascular health is actually pulses like the plants, and they want you to eat more beans and stuff. There was the North American Meat Institute and the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. What's interesting about them is they came up and they said that basically that the meat is leaner now than what it used to be, and you can still eat beef and still stay within the guidelines of the food guidelines of the USDA. And they should have owned it. They should have owned, like, hey, beef is the most nutritious food that you can consume. And they don't know that. They're trying to try to be low fat. They're trying to push away this idea that there's saturated fat in beef. Beef is only 40% saturated fat. So anyways, it's just another industry example. The National Potato Council was there, and the Egg Nutrition Center was there, and then the School Nutrition Association was there. It's like the lunch ladies of the country. The Juice Products Association, so they want you to drink juice. What's interesting is during the beginning of the first day, Wednesday, that was a day of where the committee was putting together their thoughts and ideas about how they're going to approach this. They talked about various beverages, and they put sweetened beverages in one category. And a sweetened beverage had more than 40 grams per serving of sugar. And then they had another category of less than 40 grams of sugar per serving, but 100% juice was in there. So even though juice had more than 40 grams of sugar, that was in the wrong category, but that's how they separated it out because the juice was natural. So there's also the National Milk Producers Federation and the Grain Chain. The Grain Chain, they want you to eat more grains. Soy Foods Association of North America. The International Bottled Water Association, so they want you to hydrate. And then there was also Mars Wrigley, and a representative from Wrigley wants you to chew gum. So in my viewpoint, these are all easily dismissible because they were standing there saying, we exist and we're very important. And we're going to use observational studies, and we're going to talk about our food products within those studies. And we're going to talk about calories. They're going to say things like grains and soy and fruit juice is all okay because the whole message is keep your calories down. So you can eat soy and you can eat 100% fruit juice or whatever, as long as you're matched the calorie number. That's currently the standard way of talking when it comes to dietetics in the United States. Next, I'm going to show you some videos from the second day of these meetings. And this is where 77 people had 3 minutes to speak. I'm going to show you just some of the highlights. And I showed you already that the industries were there. But when it comes to actually trying to care for the diets of Americans, now it comes down to the plant-based people versus the low-carb people. And it comes down to the studies. And I'm going to show you 3 plant-based people, and you may know some of them. And they talk about observational studies. They say the words Okinawans. They say blue zones. And they say that eating processed meat is like smoking cigarettes. That's what observational studies show us, and it's not truth. Then I'll show you some of the low-carb people. The low-carbers talk about clinical trials. They don't talk about observational studies. And the observational studies are not science. I already showed you that. But here we go. This is Dr. Greger from nutritionfacts.org.
This month, a paper was published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics that found that essentially there's been no change in processed meat consumption over the last 20 years or so, which represents just an abject failure of all of us in the public health community to warn people about the very real risks of processed meat: bacon, ham, hot dogs, lunch meat, sausage. Right? These are known human carcinogens. The official 2018 IARC report couldn't have been clearer. Quote, consumption of processed meat causes cancer of the colorectal. Quote, that's our...
The IARC committee from the World Health Organization was a panel of all vegetarian vegans, and they did not use good science at all to come to the conclusion that processed meat causes colorectal cancer. That's been thoroughly debunked by various bloggers, one being Dr. Georgia Eade, and her website is diagnosisdiet.com.
Second leading cancer killer of men and women combined. We know these foods cause cancer.
We don't know these foods cause cancer. He's referring to observational studies and really bad studies on mice. You can't just say we know these foods cause cancer. It's just not a fact.
Try not to smoke around our kids. Why would we send them to school with a bologna sandwich? That's not hyperbole. According to the Surgeon General, living with a smoker increases the risk of lung cancer 15%. So the cancer risk of secondhand smoke is comparable to the 16 or 18% increased risk of colorectal cancer, eating the equivalent of a single sausage link a day.
That is completely off the mark. When he's talking about observational studies, he's saying that sausage is like smoking cigarettes for cancer. The observational studies on smoking showed a 116 odds ratio. So, whereas what he's referring to is an odds ratio, or maybe a relative risk, is the same thing, of 2 or of 0.5. And so the bigger the number is the greater association between the thing you're studying and cancer. So let me just repeat this. So smoking is like 115 odds ratio or relative risk, and then eating sausage is 0.5. He's saying it's the same statistics. It's totally not.
You know, the 2015 Dietary Guidelines really appeared to drop the ball on this issue, saying processed meat could be accommodated as long as sodium and saturated fat limits were within limits. But that's ignoring the cancer risk, which we've known at least back since 2007, when the first comprehensive analysis was published by the American Institute for Cancer Research. In fact, one of their top 10 recommendations for cancer prevention: avoid processed meat, full stop. We cannot allow the billion-dollar meat industry to continue to subvert the science when so many million lives are at stake.
The billion-dollar processed meat industry is not subverting our health or the studies. What's happening is these epidemiological schools, like Harvard School of Public Health, they're doing these observational studies, and then they full stop before the experiment is conducted. They're the ones ruining our lives, not the industry of processed meat.
The Global Burden of Disease Study.
Okay, Global Burden of Disease Study.
Largest study of disease risk factors.
Largest study of disease risk factors. Again, this is epidemiology. He's not saying it's epidemiology. He's not saying it's an observational study. He's not saying that there was no clinical trial or experiment. He's just saying the global, and then he's going to go on with the hypothesis. You do the observation, you get a hypothesis, and then you test it. We're just going to learn the hypothesis here.
History, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, found that the number one cause of death in these United States is the American diet. You now have this mantle to make a difference by just informing the American public about the risk of cancer with processed meat.
But we're already decreasing our consumption of red meat by 28%, and cancer rates keep going up. So you can't say that we need to eat less meat just based on that. So another thing that vegans have been saying is that you can lose weight and you can reverse various lab tests by snorting cocaine or shooting heroin, but it doesn't mean that it's healthy. They're equating eating meat with shooting cocaine or snorting cocaine or shooting heroin. So you may hear that from a vegan, and you're going to hear something like another large population study, such as Okinawans. And that study was done right after World War II. The island of Okinawa was completely decimated. Many human lives were lost and many pig lives were lost. The word Okinawa actually means the land of the pig eaters. So it took many, many years after World War II for them to recover their pig population. But when a study was done on their long life and their diet, it was found that they weren't eating much pork. Well, that's because they were wiped out during World War II.
Japan Popper. I'm from Wellness Forum Health in Columbus, Ohio, and I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. We've been in business for almost 25 years, diabetes and lower ages of rheumatoid arthritis. And of course, the population's getting fatter and sicker. It's rare to see a normal weight, the thing that has caused these people to be sick. Most of our people have eaten a diet high in fat and protein, too much animal food, too much dairy, too much processed food. We standard procedure in our office. We put these people on a low-fat, high-fiber, plant-based diet, and they get better. In fact, they get better so quickly that they have to be medically monitored because the drops in blood pressure and glucose levels mean that medications have to be reduced and sometimes withdrawn within a few days.
And I've seen this to be true in a clinical trial where it was done by Dr. Neil Bernard, and the drop in the insulin and the drop of the medications was pretty pronounced for the first few months, but then after that it came right back up. And compare that to the ketogenic trial by Virta Health. They also had amazing drops initially, and then it came up a little bit. Now that Virta Health study has been going on for 2 years, a clinical trial, and the results from Virta Health low-carb keto eating is much better than the vegan plant-based diet trial run by Dr. Bernard.
Well, there's a lot of confusion about diet. Some of it's been sowed here. People advocating high-fat diets, and I personally take offense to anybody who would come up here and say that the dietary guidelines are a joke.
So I'm going to refer later to the person that said that the dietary guidelines are a joke. You'll hear me talk about that later.
That's my opinion. I think it's offensive, but...
And Dr. Popper here is a proponent of the food guidelines as they currently are. She's actually advocating for more plant-based, which would then lead to more heart disease, more cancer, more obesity. 91% of American men are overweight. It's because we've been following these plant-based recommendations since 1980.
There are a lot of things that cause people to lose weight and have good biomarkers. One's cocaine addiction. I've never had a fat cocaine addict in my office, and I've never had one with high cholesterol or high fasting glucose levels. A plant-based diet, low in fat, high in fiber, is the one consumed by the healthiest people on the planet, like the Okinawans, who didn't get the memo that high-carb, starch-based diets are bad for you. So I strongly encourage the committee to take a very strong stance on this issue and recommend a whole foods, plant-based diet. Thank you very much.
And I think it's absolutely ridiculous that it's 2019 and we have a group of very smart people in this room, yet we are asking what we should be eating.
So Dr. Davis brings up a good point here. So we have a lot of people asking what should we be eating, and this committee is supposed to tell us what we're eating for the next 5 years between 20 and 2025. And this law should have never been passed in the first place. These dietary guidelines have been a total disaster. So he's got a good point here. It's hard for us to believe that we're looking at a committee of 20 to direct us on what we're eating. But let me just state it again. This law should have never been passed in the first place. The government has no right to direct people like what they should be eating. They have no right to direct the medical doctors, the dietitians, the nutritionists, the schools, the universities to direct people on what they should be eating. So when people receive federal funding, the government says, here's your dietary plan. The plan is broken up into basically 3 documents. The first one's 450 pages. It has all the details for all the lunch ladies around the world, around the country, what to prepare. The next document's 150 pages, and it's more concise, and then it's a 1-pager. So there's 3 things that they need to create. It's a big task, it's a big job, but they shouldn't be having to do this in the first place. Nobody should be doing this job, period.
It's absolutely crazy. And I'll tell you what, my patients are confused. They're confused by the guidelines, and they're confused by the discussions here, and they're confused by bad science. So I ask you to look at this science very carefully. Because I did. I wrote a book saying we should be eating protein first and we should be on ketosis diets. But you know what happens to these ketosis patients? They end up eventually on my operating room table.
He's saying that a ketogenic diet causes heart disease, and they have to end up getting surgery to repair their heart or something like that. All right, show me the science on that. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence. Dr. Popper and Dr. Davis here are saying, I have people eating a plant-based diet, and everybody's doing fantastically. And I spoke, I'll show you that later, and I said the same thing. I've been teaching low carb since 1998. I've been teaching ketosis the last 4 years. I take no insurance. People won't come and see me unless they actually get results. And this is how you get people better, and I say that. But you know what? Forget all that, because everybody's got their success stories. So that's all anecdotal. Anecdotal, the word means not written down, not published. All right, but then you have to look at the science. And so once we're done with Dr. Davis here, I'm going to go over to the real science, the controlled trials and the clinical trials.
When they failed this diet over and over again,
So he's talking about failing the diet of the keto low-carb diet. So people take breaks from it, but it's so easy to get back on it. And compare that with the plant-based diet where 85% of the people that start it end it within 3 months and they don't go back.
we talk about it all the time. So I eventually went back and said, why am I failing the ketosis diet and why are my patients failing? And I studied this extensively. And I looked around the world because you know what? You've heard people here tell you that carbs cause diabetes, and yet when you look at the blue zones...
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. The blue zones, epidemiology, that's all you need to know about like the rest that he says. He does mention myocytosis, which is the muscle cells are filled with fat, and he blames that on eating meat. Well, that's already been debunked. It's the sugar, it's the carbs that make the muscle cells fill up with fat. So he tries to get into some physiology there, and he's very animated. He's very captivating. He's one of the loudest on the microphone. And as was Dr. Greger, that very animated people, and they have a mission to get people to stop eating meat. So let me stop right there with them. I'm going to move on to some of the low carbers. So now let's get into some low carbers. This is one of my favorite of the day. This is Dr. Wali.
I'm Dr. Priyanka Wali. I'm a practicing physician from California who specializes in obesity medicine. I have treated thousands of patients who suffer from obesity and obesity-related complications such as diabetes and metabolic syndrome. I work on the front lines and I use nutritional plans as a therapeutic tool for my practice every day. I'm here because I'm very concerned that the current nutritional guidelines do not reflect the current health status of our nation. You know, if laughter was the best medicine, then the nutritional guidelines are best practice because they're a joke that's fallen flat. And I believe that's because the committee has forgotten the number one rule when it comes to joke writing: know your audience. Well, let me tell you about your audience. 1 in 5 Americans has diabetes. 1 in 3 has prediabetes. This is a disease that will kill you slowly by eating away at your brain, your vision, your vital organs. We suspect that 50% of Americans right now have prediabetes. They just don't even know it. These are diseases caused by high insulin levels, which is caused by eating carbohydrates. And it doesn't matter if it comes from whole grain or cane sugar or 100% fruit juice. A carb is a carb is a carb. If you have prediabetes or diabetes, you are essentially carbohydrate intolerant, meaning when you put carbs in your body, it becomes affecting your hormones, you become hormonally imbalanced, and you become sick. These are the medical facts. The current guidelines advise that consuming no more than 10% of calories from excess sugar. How can we make this recommendation if we know that half the country is carbohydrate intolerant? It's like if you knew someone had a life-threatening food allergen, you wouldn't tell them, well, avoid the food allergen, but you can eat up to 10% of your calories of that allergen. You would tell them, no, avoid this allergen at all costs. So why would it be any different with sugar? If there are people in this country who are carbohydrate intolerant, and that's half the country, please change the excess sugar limit recommendation from 10% to 0%. Please reduce the recommended carbohydrate intake by half to reflect the current health status of our nation. The guidelines are a joke now, but they don't have to be. The guidelines should be medicine because food is medicine. I've seen it in my practice with my patients, and right now we are prescribing the wrong medicine for our country. Thank you.
So the USDA committee here cannot view food as medicine. That's part of their job. They can only look at food as something that may prevent a bad health condition in the future, but not to reverse it. So for Dr. Wally to say that, she's trying to get them to just at least think that way. Maybe they can sneak that into the guidelines that, maybe we can reverse some conditions. And having said that, let me take you over to Dr. Sara Hallberg, and she really nails that aspect.
Hello, my name is Dr. Sara Hallberg, and I work for Indiana University Health and Verta Health, and I am pleased to be here today. I have worked in the obesity field for almost 25 years. I worked for years as an internal medicine physician in primary care, and I instructed my patients to follow the dietary guidelines. My patients brought back their food records, talked of their new exercise programs, and got sicker and more obese. I got more despondent as a provider. I was not helping them at all. Then I spent a year scouring the scientific literature on how I was going to solve the unsolvable problem. I discovered a low-carb eating pattern, and the hardest thing for me to do was make peace with the fact that despite my best intentions, I had previously been making my patients worse, not better, with my advice. I founded the obesity program at Indiana University Health Arnett as a low-carbohydrate program almost a decade ago. The results we saw were almost unbelievable. People losing weight, regaining their health, reversing hypertension, fatty liver disease, lipid disorders, and type 2 diabetes. I am now the PI on the largest and longest controlled clinical trial ever to look at very low carbohydrate nutrition interventions for type 2 diabetes, and here are our results. At 1 year, 60% of the 262 intervention patients had reversed their diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. At 2 years, this number remained at 54%, and our patients had lost an average of 12% of their body weight, an average of 30 pounds, while improving their 10-year cardiovascular risk score. Let me repeat. 54% of patients with a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes had reversed out of this disease. Compare this with the Women's Health Initiative, which tested the dietary guidelines and found that they did nothing to prevent diabetes or cardiovascular disease risk reduction and resulted in less than 5 pounds of weight loss at a year. I think it is very important to review the enormous body of clinical trial evidence for a low carbohydrate eating pattern in obesity and early metabolic disease.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Susan Wilbur, and I'm a general internist practicing primary care and obesity medicine at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, speaking on my own behalf. I am here to implore you to consider the mounting evidence in support of a low carbohydrate diet as a viable and necessary approach in the new dietary guidelines. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years. The first 24 were a cycle of seeing patients with their uncontrolled chronic conditions, tweaking medications, while watching them gain weight and their diseases worsen. That was in spite of my continually recommending exercise and a diet of whole grains, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, and low-fat dairy. But it never worked, and I mean never. In those 24 years, 2 people lost weight and 1 gained it back. And then, when I got to be middle-aged, and that same advice no longer worked for me, I realized that my advice might be wrong. I tried a low-carb ketogenic diet, lost weight effortlessly, and tried it with my patients who were desperate for help. Patients like a young woman with newly diagnosed out-of-control diabetes. She ate perfectly according to the guidelines, and standard advice would have been to eat less, move more, and start insulin. She would have been relegated to a lifetime of needles, weight gain, and the psychological impact of living with a chronic disease. Instead, I taught her a low-carb diet, and in just 3 months, she was barely in the pre-diabetic range, lost 25 pounds, and was overjoyed. More than 90% of the patients who come to me on insulin are able to discontinue it. In April, the American Diabetes Association said, and I quote, "Reducing overall carbohydrate intake for individuals with diabetes has demonstrated the most evidence for improving glycemia." But a low-carb diet is beneficial not just for patients with established disease. A recent study by the University of North Carolina showed that a full 88% of the nation has at least one of the 5 components of the metabolic syndrome. Results from my patients in studies like the A to Z trial prove that a low-carbohydrate diet not only has better weight loss than standard dietary advice, but better improvement in every component of the metabolic syndrome. Nearly 1,500 people have come through my weight loss clinic over the past 6 years with an average weight loss of 12% at 9 months, and have kept it off for at least 18 months. With a reduction in medication burden, improvement in blood pressure, fatty liver disease, sleep apnea, arthritis, and enhancement in quality of life. I was so burned out from doing the same thing over and over and not getting results. I am now excited about practicing medicine again, knowing I can help my patients improve their health. But we are tired of having to defend a low-carbohydrate diet as a valid dietary choice. it is working for us, is supported by irrefutable medical evidence, and demands a place in the guidelines. Thank you.
So here's my speech. I was very nervous.
Hi, my name is Dr. Darin Schmidt. I have a practice in Ann Arbor, Michigan called Nutritional Healing Center of Ann Arbor. I speak on my own behalf. So I've been teaching low carb to my patients since 1998 and ketosis in the last 4 years. And I quit taking insurance in 2005. I actually have to get my patients well or else they won't come and see me because they're paying cash out of their pocket. So I sat with you guys all day yesterday and I understand the complexities that you're dealing with and all the moving parts. And I thought, what can I share with you to help you out with your job? So Heather, you had some good points yesterday about low carb and intermittent fasting, and Lydia, you said some good things too. So let me share this with you. Maybe this will help you out. So there's an equation that I learned like 15 years ago, and it's this. It's quantity plus quality equals vitality, or quantity plus quality equals health. So initially with my care, I would tell people, eat these foods and eat that food, and they would say, what about bananas? What about pork? And I stopped answering the questions, and I said, fit your macros into these guidelines. So you can be plant-based, you can be meat-based, whatever. And so the quantity comes first in that equation, the quantity of the macronutrients. So then quality comes second. So lowering the carbs is vital. When you look at our current health situation, obesity and all that, and then people have to match what they need for protein to be adequate protein or maybe more. And then their fat grams can go up and down. Of course, it's going to be healthy fat. So that's what I want to share with you. Quantity comes first, then quality equals vitality. So that way people can choose whatever foods that they're going to, what they want to match their lifestyle with. And then when you do that, you're not liable to upsetting special interest. And also, then you look at the macros in the research with the randomized control trials, the clinical trials, as opposed to epidemiology. You get the causes with the RCTs, and you'll see that, for example, the Public Health Collaboration of the UK, they have investigated all these RCTs regarding low carb versus low fat, and they show that low carb wins 32 to nothing. So when you work with the low carb ideology, it's easier just to talk with the macronutrients. So I hope this helps you out. And if you want to discuss with me, I'm available to you. Thank you.
So the final point here is that the Dietary Committee has to use the preponderance of science to make the recommendations beginning in October of 2020 about what we should be eating. So what really is science? It's not epidemiology or observational studies, it's trials. And the trials show that low carb beats low fat. And the plant-based diet is primarily high carb. And the low carb diet, obviously it's low carb, higher fat, higher protein. And clinically, it's the best diet out there. Now, is the committee going to follow the science? Right now, they're not. So out of 40 studies that they're looking at, 35 of them are meta-analyses. And they talk with terms such as confounders and covariants. Again, that's observational terminology. So right now, they're not following the law. They're not doing what the law is telling them to do, is to look at the preponderance of science. And I'm just going to repeat myself. In order to have the science, you got to do the experiment. Observational studies do not do any experiments. So those observational studies need to be thrown out, and you got to stick with the real science. And the real science, it's obvious that low carb beats low fat, and that meat is healthy for you, and that healthy fat is healthy for you. And you don't need to eat a whole bunch of plants and lose your muscles in order to be healthy. So if you like this information, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, and hopefully the Dietary Committee will do the right thing and follow the law. That's their job. They need to follow the law and end up talking about randomized control trials, and then they can lead us down the path of the low-carb diet. And as a matter of fact, they can keep the guidelines exactly as they are and just add low carb as an option. And that's exactly what the American Diabetic Association did 2.5 months ago, as they said the low-carb diet is an option.